To act or to live a life of regret because you did nothing. These are our choices as we face the challenges of this century. Violence against women is on the news every day. It's happening at the workplace, on the streets, in people's homes, and if you pay attention, it might be at your own workplace, in your own home. Now, politicians like to talk about what can be done for survivors. Particularly, they like to talk about their empathy for the survivors and also what they can learn from their daughter or wife or sister. But there is another part to this story, and that is how men and boys can change their behaviours and become activists to end violence against women. And that is the part of my research. The question of how do men and boys become agents for change to stop violence against women in their own community? The fundamental question of how do people change? And to do this, I collaborated with Oxfam Great Britain to look at their case studies in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Timor Leste through their We Can End Violence Against Women campaign. The campaign works very closely with local activists in the community, and they are simply ordinary men and women, shopkeepers, students, lawyers, journalists. And through these training, these education, they learn about what is domestic violence, what does it mean for the community, what are its impact, and then also what can people in your own community do to stop it. And it's amazing to see how this can take place at a daily level. From a simple conversation about the weather or how the children are doing, you also learn about what is domestic violence, or that beating your wife is actually a crime. Now, not all of the story I tell you are nice ones. In one case related to me, a 12-year-old girl decided to go to her cousin's wedding without telling her friends. Now, no matter where we are, parents would naturally be furious, and the girl might receive a punishment, such as being grounded. What the father did was to pick up a stick and beat the girl to death in front of her mother. The man was arrested. However, the mother was forced to forgive him. This was because he is the sole income earner in the family, and the woman and her children are reliant on him for survival. She was also heavily pressured by the community because what he did constituted the so-called honor killing, the patriarchal concept that a woman can be killed or a girl could be killed because somehow she had dishonored her own family. Now, imagine, as a mother, seeing your daughter being beaten to death and having to pardon the murderer, all because of financial reasons and community pressure. There is another story which offers us more inspiration, and that is a wealthy landlord in Pakistan who, during a land dispute, killed someone. Now, the family, the victim's family, said to him, "If you give us your daughter to marry into our family, we can forgive you and you won't have to go to jail. We'll drop the case." Instead of accepting this offer and use his daughter as a settlement, he rejected it and he went to jail. Now, prisons in Pakistan is very different from those in Australia. The landlord did not tell me much about what happened or what the prison was like, except that it was a very different environment from what he was used to, and that he used that time to reflect on his life and what he did. When he was released, he began to work with Oxfam to change this cultural practice of using daughters to settle disputes. Now, the people in the village were shocked. They said to him, "What's happened to you? You've changed." And indeed, this is a man who was born to a life of privilege and wealth. He was accustomed for other people to do his bidding. He never had to bow to anyone. And yet, from that life of wealth and privilege and using violence to dominate, he rejected that past life and he decided to use his influence for the good of his community. There is another story, a non-government organization director. Now, he grew up witnessing family violence, of his father beating his mother. One instance, he said, "I remember seeing my father beating my mother with a brick." When this director became a young man, he confronted his father and he said to him, "If you touch my mother again, I will kill you." This young man then went on to university and he found other students and academics who share his same values and beliefs about women's rights and feminism. And he became a local champion on women's rights and founded a non-government organization that support girls' education and women's empowerment. Now, you might be asking me by now, well, this is all very inspiring, but how do we get to that point? How do we do it? Well, we can do that by instilling into our society and community and in neighborhoods an intolerance to violence against women. And I know that it can be a very frightening and intimidating experience to stand up against someone or stand up against a dominant value or practice. Feel like you're the only voice in the majority of opposition to you. But let me give you an example to think about. Say one day you're walking on the beach, it's a nice day, and you're alone, there's nobody around. You had a beach to yourself. Suddenly you heard a cry, and in the sea you could see someone struggling and drowning and crying out for help. What would you do? Would you try to find a lifeguard? Try to find other people to help? If you can swim, maybe you might even try to jump in and rescue the person yourself. But what you probably won't do is to walk away and do nothing. Or even worse, take a photo and put it on social media. It is immoral not to act to save a drowning person, just the same as it's immoral not to act when you witness or know someone is a survivor of violence against women. Now think back to the landlord and the NGO director. The landlord, who had the chance to get away from jail sentence, rejected that offer and went to prison instead. The NGO director, who grew up in a family violence situation where his father was using violence against his own mother, and that father was viewed through the prism of fear, of violence and rage. He could have become complicit. Instead, he stood up against his father. And in that moment, he not only saved himself as well as his mother, but he also became a figure of hope and inspiration, as well as a model for other men to become better than themselves, to become better than what their family or their society tell him, this is what you can be. This is the life you can have. He rejected that. To act or to live a life of regret because you did nothing. These are our choices as we face the challenges of this century.
Neural interface engineering is big picture science. It's hard, unpredictable, slow, but with the potential for sweeping benefits to society. It's not rocket science, but the two fields actually have a lot of similarities. They both require big ambitions and big teams. We know they're possible to achieve. We went to the moon half a century ago now and invented the bionic ear. But increasingly, the way that our science and society is structured seems to discourage this type of big picture thinking.